So before I start, I just wanted to thank Professor Ashita and colleagues, Professor Takuchi and Professor Tamuri for the invitation to come here. Very nice to be here in Kyushu, where I've never visited before. So this will be a talk between myself and my colleague Simon, and we will try to time it just perfectly. But if not, Dr. Ashita will keep us to time. And if we do happen to finish early, then we can fill it in with some clarifications that in case we skip anything over. And I'm just changing that. Okay. So Emmy asked me to speak about development, implementation, and assessment of research data management at the University of Edinburgh, where I have worked for a very long time, actually, 26 years. I'm celebrating working on research data services at the University of Edinburgh. My colleague has been with us 2.5 years, and he's already quite a senior member of the team and making himself known around the university, doing outreach. And I should use this. That way. Just tap. This one. There. I'll press it harder next time. Okay, so just first to give you a bit of context about how we work within the University of Edinburgh as a research institution. It's a very old university in the UK. They call it an ancient University of Scotland because it's one of the earliest, founded in 1583. We have a lot of students, about 50,000 students, and 40% of those are postgraduate students. They're not all researchers, but we have two kinds of master's students. Research master's students who may move on to PhD research, and the others are taking curriculum-based courses in a particular subject, earning a master's. So we tend to help the researchers, the students and the staff. It's very diverse student body. 50% of the students are international based. And we have a lot of staff as well. Out of the total staff of almost 18,000 total staff doing support services, and more than half of those are academic staff teaching and doing research. There's an example of research income from a fairly recent year. And of course, the mission of the university is the creation, dissemination, and curation of knowledge. And we've made a lot of use of that word curation in the mission. And as well as the mission, there's a number of strategies that we can align ourselves to. Currently, the digital research strategy and the research culture strategy, which I don't think I have a slide about, but those are the current strategies that we are aligning our services towards. And also to show the diversity of the research in the university, there are 21 schools across 3 colleges. A similar type of division of the colleges as what Jake was describing. So we have arts, humanities, and social sciences. We have medicine and veterinary medicine, and we have science and engineering. In addition to that basic structure, we have a very important program going on now. It sounds similar to what's happening at Kyushu University. We have a data-driven innovation program It's a 10-year program funded by the UK government. Some very clever colleagues appealed to a type of funding in the UK called the city-region deal, which traditionally builds things like roads and transport and infrastructure. And they applied for the city region of Edinburgh to include the universities as part of that underlying infrastructure. It was quite an innovative idea that worked. And so a lot of money came to the region with the goal of establishing the region as the data capital of Europe, attracting investment, fueling entrepreneurship, and delivering inclusive growth. The University of Edinburgh is very much a part of this, along with partner universities such as Heriot-Watt. And I read just recently on the university webpage that we have already exceeded a key government objective well before 2028 to drive to secure more than 200 million of investments supporting businesses doing innovation. So 4 times the initial target already. So that's fueling the economy directly through data-driven innovation. So I can't take credit for that, but that gives some more context to how the University of Edinburgh is pursuing data-driven innovation, including artificial intelligence, data science. And we have these hubs which provide cross-disciplinary research. And they work very much, especially with professors in our School of Informatics, to consider how data science can be integrated across different fields. So we have the Bayes Institute, which focuses on computing science. And also there's Robotarium, where we have lots of robots that you can see. The Usher Institute, which focuses on health, and there's a lot of innovation about driving healthcare. Easter Bush, which is leading in the agriculture arena. And Edinburgh International Data Facility, which is not the service that Simon and I work with, but they do work with the regional businesses, and it's led by the Edinburgh Parallel Computing Centre, which also runs supercomputers and lots of computing infrastructure nationally. This is also going on in the context. So I'm going to talk about just a very personal reflection, which I think is what Emmy was wanting in terms of the factors in the successful development of the Research Data Service in this time period from 2008 to 2016, when everything was developing. And in no particular order, it's interesting that some of these concepts have already come up in our discussion over lunchtime, and in Jake's presentation as well. There's a lot of parallel points. So in 2008, we formed an RDM action group, and I just wanted to emphasize, I mean, the names may or may not be important to you, but I just wanted to point out these are, it's very much individuals coming together and saying, how are we going to solve this problem? I think one of the points that was made is, if you need expertise from many different parts of the organization, is it going to be a problem where the expertise, where the responsibility for providing the service falls between all of them and nobody picks up the responsibility? Or are there going to be some change makers who collaborate together to build something from nothing? So I feel like we were part of that in the early days, and so we had Tony Weir, who very much understood what researchers were wanting from the computing side of things. They were building bespoke environments in the Unix team, and now he's gone on to be the director of IT infrastructure for the university. We had Stuart Lewis, who is the head of the digital library, running the technology of the whole library. And he brought a lot of personal knowledge about building repositories and inventing software apps. And there was myself, who had been working in the data library, which was sort of a particular type of service for helping people find and access data sets for analysis. And I think I was perceiving that trying to understand how to modernize that service. We were no longer receiving, over the years, data had been received on tape and on CD-ROM and DVD. And then people are just downloading it from the internet, and they don't necessarily need help finding the data, just the same way they might not need help finding information once we had Google to search. So in terms of modernizing the data library, it occurred to me people needed more help managing research data than they did finding the research data. So it was kind of pivoted into research data management. And my colleague at the time, Stuart McDonald, collaborated with me on that. And so I just wanted to point out, we did hear this come up in Jake's talk. And if you are at the beginning stages, take heart. It's worth it to be brave and find like-minded souls across your university who you can work with together and build something. So here's another point. You may need high-level champions. So there's kind of bottom-up and top-down work to get it just right. So we were lucky to have a high-level champion at the time, Professor Jeff Haywood, who is the Chief Information Officer. This was a new title at the time, Chief Information Officer, Vice Principal Knowledge Management, and Librarian to the university. And he had a background as a researcher in the School of Education. And he was our champion then. We currently, the person filling his role now is also a champion for us, Mr. Gavin McLaughlin. He comes from the business world, but before he worked for us, he worked at University College London, which is a major research performing institution in London. And he brought ideas about doing digital research services. So back then in 2010, two groups were set up: a research data policy group, that was led by the library director, and it was in fact written by the director, the outgoing director of the Digital Curation Center. He was retiring, and he did this as a consultant. And then the research data storage group, which was led by a professor of physics, and that was to set up a storage array, a very large storage array across the university, so that every researcher would have a 0.5 terabyte of data as a place to store their data on university premises. And that was eventually rolled out in 2012. And then those groups evolved into a permanent group called the Research Data Service Steering Group. And our most recent champion there is Professor Andrew Miller, School of Biosciences, and we're currently seeking a new chair. So another point that helps in the development of research data services is to learn from experimentation. So use small-scale service or development projects to try things out with a small amount of money, and then if it works, you can make the business case that there's demand for it, and you need more money to provide, for example, permanent staff or technology. So some of our early exemplars were the Disk UK Data Share project in 2008. This was, we were making the case, as we heard in the previous talk, that librarians are in a good position to do this work of supporting researchers in research data management. So I was a data librarian. There were also people in similar roles, like a data librarian at Oxford and Southampton. And so we worked together with our repository manager counterparts who were used to running a repository for publications. And we developed proof of concept demonstrators using the three major open source repository platforms at the time, DSpace, Fedora, and ePrints, at the three universities. And we said, look, it can be done, and you can begin to see how you can get researchers to deposit data in an institutional data repository. And we also got national funding for the Research Data Mantra project, which Mantra, that stands for Research Data Management Training. And so we developed online learning materials for researchers on what research data management was all about. And it was just it still exists. We've updated it on a regular basis. And it's just the things that you need to know to do any kind of digital research project and take care of the data well from a user's point of view. And at that time, we did a needs assessment with 3 partner schools in the University of Edinburgh to determine, very similar to the previous talk, what those academic staff thought the students would need to know. And then another early project was the Data Audit Framework projects led by the Digital Curation Center. And Digital Curation Center itself was an early project for me that got me interested in digital preservation and understanding what persistent identifiers were and all of those kind of things that I hadn't been exposed to before. But the Data Audit Framework project, in that we worked with the School of Geosciences at University of Edinburgh, and we did interviews with the researchers and the IT staff about what data they were holding, what they understood about it, what information they had gathered, what information was in danger of being lost about the data. And it was very insightful. The word audit in this methodology that was developed has been changed to asset, because I think none of the pilots succeeded in doing a complete audit of the data because it's just too big of a job. So it was changed to data asset framework, and that methodology exists. That you can go look for how to do your own exercise, audit type of exercise. That had an outcome of fundamental recommendations for the services, including the university needs a research data management policy, and the university needs training for all of the staff and students on research data management. It also needed storage space, which we did roll out, as I said, with the data store service. So another kind of lesson learned, ensure that if you are developing a policy, ensure that your policy informs your service and your service supports your policy, kind of back and forth symbiotic relationship. And I didn't put on the slide, but also I know we're talking about the changes in the funding environment here and the regulations from the government. Certainly the UK national funders also very much informed our local policy, and the policy needed to back up what the funders were saying and encourage the researchers to do what was needed for the funders as well, and also the publishers. So anyway, the first university policy was done in 2011, and it was labeled as aspirational. It said right at the top, this is an aspirational policy, because they were worried that people would say, oh, we can't comply with your policy because the services don't exist for us to do all this. But so it was some people who were behind the decision to make the policy, the high-level academics. There was a bit of debate. should we have a policy now, or should we develop the services and then have a policy? But it has worked very well to have the policy first, to inform the development of the services. So as we're building the services, we're not just doing something like build it and they will come. We're actually building something that the university has said it requires in order to be where it wants to be with that aspiration. So, and the existence of the policy shored up the resources to be able to build those services. So it's very easy to make the case, we need money for this because we need to fulfill this policy, which you have said is an aspiration. So working hand in hand, it worked very well. Some other points about the policy, which Simon will actually tell you a bit more of what's in the current 2022 policy. But one thing we learned was you have to kind of be careful what is mandated in the policy and what is only recommended. And so there's two sides of that. One is if you don't mandate it, the researchers won't do it. If it's just a recommendation, then they might forget about it. But on the other hand, you can't mandate things that are not realistic for the researchers to do. So you have to find that right balance. And so when we revised the policy 2021-2022, we were able to add more mandates, but that's partly because we had built the services so that by that time, so that the researchers would have a way to fulfill the mandates. There were some things we left out in 2021-2022, things that we didn't say you must do, but maybe in 5 years when we review the policy again, maybe by that time the culture will have changed enough to say, yes, and now everybody is doing this. It makes sense to say, for example, if you publish your data in an external repository, you must put a metadata record into the research information system and link it to your paper and your project. At the moment, that's just a recommendation. It's not mandated because nobody would do it. Some people are doing it, so we have good practice, but that's still aspirational. And hopefully it'll be able to be automated also in 5 years. And then finally, an element of choice helps to lend credibility to the policy. So we don't just say, this is how you manage your data, do this, 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 and this. There's academic freedom. We have researchers from all different disciplines with different norms and ways of working. It's up to them to decide, it's part of their methodology, really, to decide how to manage their data, to know what services to use in their disciplinary community. It might be a university service, it might be a disciplinary service, might be a national or international service or a cloud service. But the policy makes quite clear the researcher has the responsibility to do the research data management, and the university offers services, but it's up to them to choose. So I think that helped give credibility to the policy, that it wasn't controversial. The researchers were happy with the policy. So another lesson, I guess, is add functions and scale the service up as you are able, as you can demonstrate demand for further investment. So for example, when we started, we had data store, which was the free storage, 0.5 terabyte per researcher. We had data share, which was the open access data repository that was set up from that project, that national funded project. And we had something called Data Vault. Simon will say more about it in a bit, but a long-term retention solution for data that cannot be shared openly. And so from the basis of those three original services, more were added in that period. And one of the ways we determined what services needed to be added is using one of these data life cycles or research life cycles This is the one that's on one of our websites at the moment. And these are the actions that a researcher needs to do as they go through their research project. And what we can do is we can look at this and map our services and say, well, when the researcher needs to do this, we offer this service. When the researcher needs to do that, they're kind of on their own because we don't have a service to help them with that. And so you can get an idea of what the gaps are. And it may be okay that you don't fill all the gaps because you know they're getting that from somewhere else. So in 2016, the Research Data Management Program was declared by our champion at the time, the Chief Information Officer, that now it's a research data service. And I think that helped us because it took a bunch of different things here and there, run by different parts of information services, put it together and said there will be one service owner responsible for developing this. So the first service owner was Stuart Lewis in that previous slide, and now I'm the current research data service owner. So in that sense, it's my responsibility to make sure that the research data service continues to grow in the right directions, along with what our governance committee finds to be fit for purpose. So after 2016, we've really been focused on increasing service uptake, making systems more robust. That Data Vault service has code written from scratch. So we've made it open source code. It's in GitHub, but it's very much developed based on our own infrastructure and tape drives. And there were a lot of bugs. So we've been working very hard to make it more robust, make it not break, and to scale it up so that now we can take 10 terabytes at a time of a deposit, which the open access repository cannot. That's on the website. We've also been securing adequate funding for staff to staff the service. So we now have 6 people on my team, and as well as the other teams that we work with. So the only thing we've really been developing that's new in that time is adding open science tools, such as our membership to Open Science Framework. Now we have regular trainings for that, an electronic lab notebook. We have more options, including from cloud providers that researchers can use as long as it meets our criteria for open science. And now I'm going to turn it over to Simon for a bit, and then I'll come back for the concluding part.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate what the other speakers have said, thank you very much for the invitation. It's really wonderful to be here, and I very much appreciate it. I'm just going to talk fairly quickly about some of the on-the-ground stuff. So Robin's talked through some of the development of our service, give you some information about where we are now and how things operate on a sort of more day-to-day level. So first thing, we have the Research Data Management Policy, and as Robin mentioned, this is the second iteration of the policy. It's really grounded in the university's commitment to research integrity, to transparency, and the sort of broader commitments to research excellence. It's broken up into the following sections, as you can see here. We talk about the responsibilities. So there are information about the responsibilities of the researcher who, as Robin already explained, is responsible for doing their own data management. They are also, data ownership is devolved on the researcher, on the PI, or on the individual student if they're working on their own, if they're a postgraduate student. The university has a responsibility, obviously, to provide tools and the support and the people, which is essentially they provide our team to come along and help people do all of that stuff. But ultimately, it's very much the researcher's decision at the end of the day. So when I go and talk to researchers about our policy and I discuss it with them, one of the things I like to make very clear is that our job is not to tell you as a researcher what to do. Our job is to support you. We give you all the best information we can, and we will give you the best advice. But at the end of the day, you have to make your own decisions. So that's really where we stand with this. Data management planning is a key part of this. It's, in my opinion, the most important part of research data management, the most important part of our job, because it's the bit I do and the bit I enjoy most. That is mandated. All projects that create or collect data must have a data management plan. We have a strong recommendation that data should be made as fair as possible. Jake mentioned this earlier on. So at the end of a project, we want to make sure that the research data is as findable, accessible, interoperable, and where possible, as reusable, which essentially means making sure it's in a suitable repository, it's properly documented, access conditions are clear and well documented, and so on. We require all research data to be deposited in a suitable repository. We have two, which I'll talk about in just a second. We have two at the university, but we don't insist on researchers using our repositories. There are others that sometimes may be more suitable, disciplinary repositories. And we also want to make sure that everybody understands the rights that are involved in research. So we're talking about things like the rights of the participants, where human participants are involved, potentially rights of citizen scientists now, and also, of course, the rights of the researchers themselves to the intellectual property rights over their own research. This is another kind of life cycle. This is one we use for our service to demonstrate the kind of services we do, and I'll just run through these individually quite quickly. This is the first one. So before people start, we provide support with data management planning. That's on a one-to-one basis. So researchers will come to us. They will use we encourage them to use. They don't always use it, but we encourage them to use DMP Online, which is a platform which has templates for most of the major funders, including a couple from the university ourselves, that we have created for them. So the researchers will complete their DMP, their data management plan, on DMP Online, and they can come to us for feedback on that, for support and encouragement, and we'll work their way through it. And really, this is the point where we get to ask a lot of questions like, what kind of data are you actually creating? How do you really plan to store it? Do you understand issues around documentation, issues around quality assurance, issues around the ethical issues, and finally pushing them, ever so gently pushing them towards long-term preservation and preferably sharing, which they often get a bit resistant about, but we do try. In the second step, during the project itself, we provide support around finding and reusing data. This is less common now. I think, as Robin mentioned, people are actually pretty good at finding their own data. So they don't tend to come to us for this as much, but it does come up now and then. We provide support with active data storage. That's data store. That's our university network storage that provides free 500 gigs of storage for all research staff and research students. We provide advice on working with sensitive data, so around ethical issues, secure storage, some data protection advice, although obviously we're not legally trained, so we don't provide high-level kind of legal advice, but we will advise researchers on how to make sure that they are staying within the law. We have we have version control systems, version control services like GitLab that we can make available. A whole range of collaboration tools. DataSync is a plugin for data store. It's we're not really allowed to say this, but it's a bit like Dropbox, but IT hates it when we tell people that. So it's not like Dropbox at all, but it kind of is. It basically works the same way. And then we have a whole range of open research tools that we provide access to and training on, regular training every semester through RSpace, the Electronic Lab Notebook, OSF, the Open Science Framework, and so on. And when the researchers finish, we have two data storage options, data preservation options. We have Edinburgh Data Share, which is our open access repository. It's Core Trust. It's got Core Trust seal, which means it's an approved repository. It is well used by researchers across the whole university. There's about 7,500 items in there at the moment, I think. It's open to all researchers at the university, and it's free to access. And essentially, when they deposit the data with us, we will curate that data and make it available indefinitely. We also have Data Vault, which is our restricted access repository. Now, that started out really as a large data set repository, so for data sets that couldn't be downloaded via a web browser. But because of the way it's structured, it's also very useful for storing sensitive or personal data. So where researchers are working with people, where they're collecting personal data or sensitive data, they can store their data in Data Vault, and it will be secure in there. It's archived. It's inaccessible to anybody who does not. It's inaccessible to anyone apart from the person who made the deposit, but we have a record of it in there. So that's a very popular option with many of the social scientists. And we also run lots of training sessions. So we run training every semester. We run at least 2. We try and run more. And now we have a full complement of staff. Hopefully we'll be running more every semester, but we run several sessions a semester, online and in-person sessions. Basics, the data management for your research, that's a basic course, runs through the kind of basic concepts, the stuff that the researchers really need to know to start to get to grips with this. The writing a data management plan session, that is a very good workshop, actually. That's very effective. We actually go through the process of the researcher writing their own data management plan. They get to ask all the awkward questions and the complicated questions, and they come out at the end with a draft of their plan. It's incredibly good. They get a lot out of it. We get a lot of very positive feedback about this one. We do a session on working with personal and sensitive data. Again, we talk through ethical issues, ranging encryption and transformation of the data, some data protection stuff, things like that. And finally, we run a session on archiving the research data, which again is another very hands-on session where researchers get to create a data deposit and actually work through the process of how to upload their data to our repositories. We also have Mantra Online, and that, as Robin mentioned, it covers a whole range of topics in data management from a number of different perspectives: professional services, PIs, students. It is an absolutely, I'm completely biased, okay? I will say now, I'm completely biased. It's excellent. The reason I think it's excellent is because it taught me how to do my job in the first place years and years and years ago. It's all much better now, but it's a very, very useful tool, and I would highly recommend it as a first place to look. And we also have the research data management and sharing MOOC with North Carolina. So this is essentially how the research data support service fits together with other elements of the IT and library divisions in our in the university. So there's my team, the research data support. We're, as Robin mentioned, we're about 6 strong now, so we're at full complement for the first time in a little while. That's very exciting for us. We're very much front facing. We deal with the researchers one-on-one. We do a lot of outreach and training. We also do a lot of digital curation. My colleagues back in Edinburgh right now are facing an awful lot of work at the moment because we've had a lot of data deposits recently, and they're working through all of those. We're also part of the research services team, who are around 6 to 7 people, as you can see. They have a sort of a dual role. They operate the data center, the hardware, and systems, things like Globus they will look after. They provide high performance computing consultations. They really are the hardcore techie guys and provide a great deal of support to the researchers directly, but also to us when we're working with the researchers. And they have their own outreach people who will go out into the colleges and direct the researchers to the right support team. And they do a lot of good work too. And we're also part of the digital library. We work with the digital library, who is really our tech support team. They are the tech support team for the library and university collections, and we draw on 1.5 members of staff who are developers for our systems, primarily for data share and data vault. And they spend an enormous amount of time and hard work working with us. They have regular meetings to make sure that bugs get picked up, get fixed very quickly, but also to spend time thinking about how the repositories can and should be developing going forward, and how we can interpret understand the user requirements so we can feed back to them to get those developments created. And I think, one more. Yeah, and so this is a quotation from Keenan about the kind of skills that are needed for working in RDM, the kind of skills that librarians need to bring to the table and are very good at having and bringing to the table. Primarily, we've got things like interpersonal skills and behavioral characteristics. And this, from my point of view, this is one of the most important things, because I spend a lot of my time doing outreach and talking with researchers and sitting down with them. And I work with researchers in almost every single field, and most of those fields I have no expertise in at all. So a lot of my job is sitting down, talking to them and getting them to tell me the story of their research, getting them to explain the process, where are they coming from? And once I can understand what their research is about and how their data fits together, I can start to think about how I can support them best and what are the tools they need to put to draw on to do that work. So those interpersonal skills are incredibly important. The contextual knowledge is, that's something you just have to build up over time. It is absolutely crucial, but it's a whole learning process. And that's at the institutional level and at the national and the international level, of course, learning to grapple with what's happening across the whole kind of RDM environment, the whole RDM world, but also understanding your own researchers and their fields. It is detailed, it is complex, and it is just something you have to take time to do. Most of us will come into this, certainly I came into this, and most of you will come into this with limited information. Obviously, it's important to have some data-specific knowledge and skills, and good skills in information technology, being able to support researchers in finding and using the tools. Training and advocacy, this is the basic stuff. For me, this is my day-to-day work, is training and advocacy. So being able to stand and talk to those people, to engage them and bring them into sometimes a whole world of data management that they really would rather not have to think about. So there's a lot of effort goes into that. And then, of course, as usual, we're all working in very small teams. There's hardly any of us at the, in the team as at the best of times. So we all have to pull together and we have to be able to support one another. So I'll just pass back to Robin. Thank you.
Yes, the members of the team back home are supporting us now, so 2 of us can be in Japan at the same time. Okay, so very quickly, I will talk about assessment, kind of how we measure progress of what we're doing and know where to go from here. So the actual plan, do, act, check cycle is something that we've learned as service owners. The whole information services has adopted a service framework. We get trained in something called ITIL, and it works very well in this context. I'm aware there's a bit of irony talking to a Japanese audience about Deming's quality circles, something Japanese industry is very famous for knowing very well. But in this kind of context of IT services, basically along the lines of what I was saying with our development project, start out planning, brainstorming, what do we think we need to do here, and then do something. Do it on a small scale so it's not too expensive, and so that you can fail at it and learn from your failure as well as your success. Then the check process or study process, evaluate what you've done. Is it working? Does it need tweaking? Throw it out entirely? and start something else. And then you decide what your next action is. And so that's why it starts with one circle, but it's iterative and it keeps going. And someday we'll solve the research data management problem. So that's one way, as just through continuing what we call continual service delivery. And our team will do brainstorms together for that kind of thing. But some other tools in the toolkit for assessing your service. I always recommend doing in the same way that Simon will recommend to a researcher do a data management plan. I'll recommend to anyone setting up a research data service to use a roadmap, a service roadmap, and we have ours on the website. We did 3 iterations. We call this a living document too, but the first phase was really rollout and consolidation. The second phase was really transition and program to service. And the third phase was focusing on the user journey, how it was working for the user experience, filling gaps and improving. And this document shows, it's a giant poster reviewing the last roadmap, assessing it against FAIR principles and things like that, and how we did. And some of those gaps carried over from roadmap to roadmap. So it does get more and more challenging to fix the hardest problems. But another thing is, in terms of assessing the service, is using metrics. Sometimes you get in trouble of measuring what you have to measure rather than what you need to know, but you at least have to start somewhere and measure the uptake and reach. And I have this quick guide that's online, and we might be able to take a quick look at it, scroll through as soon as I finish. Another thing that we've done in 2022 was hire some external consultants to do digital research services review. So this was for the research data service and the computing service. And it was a very high level deep dive into how the stakeholders, including the senior principal investigators, felt about the service and how they perceived it and what additional support might be needed to be invested in. And the thing is, as a service provider, you might be afraid when your stakeholders tell you, we're going to come in and have this external person study what you're doing and see if it's any good. Don't be afraid, because the beauty of it is any gaps that they find, that gives you your reasons to ask for more investment. And that can work very well too. So we had a qualitative study and a quantitative study for that. In general, they found that the infrastructure was kind of okay, and the disciplines that were high performing in terms of data were comfortable with the status quo. They had the local support to give the on-ramps to the researchers to use the services, but the disciplines such as arts and humanities and social sciences were more digital compute intensive types of methodologies are emerging. They have a stronger wish for flexibility. They need more support, more on-ramps. They were not necessarily finding the services they needed to use. And then finally, another thing you can do is benchmarking with with other universities. As Jake was talking, Simon and I were both snapping pictures of some aspects of what they were doing, because you can be benchmarking all the time. You can be benchmarking at conferences. In this case, this was a bit of a gift to us because Oxford University paid some money to get some benchmarking done. And so we were interviewed along with these other research-intensive universities in the UK. They're all sort of bigger than us and higher ranking, and I think we were included because we have a strong research data management program. And so we were able to learn about everything that they studied from that. So it was governance, policy and staffing, preservation and storage, communication, training and events, and trusted research environments. So now we have a report that shows us and our stakeholders how we're doing things and how that compares to the others. And so I have some links here when the slides are distributed, which you're welcome to do. You can look up those links. And just a very quick look at that PDF. Oh, yes, right behind. So, yeah. Okay, there we go. So this is a public-facing example of the kind of metrics that we collect. We do have more in-depth reports for our stakeholders, but that would have been a bit, for a governance group, but that would have been a bit boring to show you. So just to show you what kinds of things. So data management planning, this is actually a couple years old because I need to modernize, I need to fill in the new numbers. But the 377 data management plans were created in the DMP Online tool in that year. Not everyone has to use the tool. Remember, we have that element of choice, so people may not use the tool to create their data management plans. We don't know how many total data management plans, so that's something we need to work on. How do we find that out? Research data management training. This is the number of people who attended training sessions. As you can see, Simon's very busy, run off his feet, training all these people in different ways, and then both in live in training sessions and online. This is how active people are storing terabytes in the data store, and they're getting support for DMPs, archiving sensitive data, and other things through our help desk. And that's our team answering queries every day that come in a reactive way. 221 items were deposited in a typical year into the repository. And that's it.